a great year for movies. As always, there were some great high-profile films, but I felt like this year in particular, there were a bunch of movies that came out of nowhere and really surprised me. It's also a great year for horror. But what were the best movies of the year? Today, I'm going to share my picks for the 10 best movies of 2022. Be sure to share your top 10 down below in the comment section. My list isn't the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. When I was deciding on my top 10, ultimately, I was looking for the movies that made me love movies. The movies that made me say,
I love movies. Gosh, I love movies.
As I look back on 2022, these are the movies that I'm just so glad that they exist and I got to experience them. Real quick, over on my Patreon page, there's several companion videos to this one. I've got more of my picks for the worst of the year, 10 more picks for the best of the year, as well as a video on most disappointing TV shows of 2022. Join at any level and you can unlock those videos as well as hundreds of others. For less than $23, you can get all the exclusive videos on Patreon in 2023. This year alone, I did over 40 live streams as well as 20 edited videos. You can learn more about Patreon down below at the link in the description, and let's get started. Number 10, Barbarian. Now, there's only been a handful of movies ever where I watched them and came home and felt compelled to recite the entire plot of the movie to my wife. Barbarian was one of those movies. It was so wild and unpredictable. As soon as I got home, I had to spoil the entire thing for her.
How dare you!
Of all the movies this year, this is the one that had the biggest WTF moment. Every time I thought I'd figured out where the movie was going, it would outsmart me and deliver something even more satisfying. It's creepy, it's unsettling, and it sticks with you. The other thing about this movie is that it has a clear message and it tackles social issues through story. It never pauses to lecture the audience. It treats the issues and the characters with nuance. You can just enjoy it as a horror film, but it also has a perspective on important issues. This movie was just such a pleasant surprise. Number 9, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Now, I didn't grow up with the Shrek movies. I have no nostalgia for the franchise, so I went into this movie without any real expectations. And it ended up not only being my favorite Shrek movie, but also my favorite animated movie of the year. Feels like they brought in some new blood with a new bag of tricks, but without abandoning what made the franchise work in the first place. It has all the laughs, all the adventure, all the wild, vibrant characters that you want from a Shrek movie, but without rehashing what they did in the past. It feels like the next step, the next version of it.
No, Puss in Boots doesn't need a spotter. Watch.
Likewise, this is probably the most focused film in the entire series, where it just does a great job of merging plot, character development, and message. So when you move into the last 10-15 minutes of the movie, it comes together in such a satisfying way that just puts a big, gigantic grin on your face. Also, it has by far the best animation of the entire series. That's a little bit unfair because the first movie came out 20 years ago and CGI technology has advanced a tremendous amount in that time. But beyond just the technological advances, there's just a real artistic flair to all of the animation here. So for me, this is a movie that delivers the best version of everything that I want from a Shrek film. Next up, Violent Night. Now, I love R-rated action movies, but we don't really get that many R-rated, theatrically released action movies anymore. And this movie takes the very familiar Die Hard on A or Die Hard in A premise and finds a fresh new way to deliver one of those movies. I mean, this is such a simple premise. Die Hard with Santa Claus. But I think that's exactly why it works. It creates very clear expectations. You're gonna get die-hard action with Santa Claus, as well as a Christmas-themed, Christmas spirit message.
They're all my naughty list. Naughty. That's naughty!
And that's what this movie delivered. And this is very much my thing. It was put out by 87 North Productions. This is the same production company that put out Nobody last year. And that means back-to-back years, they've put out the best action movie. They are like the go-to action studio these days.
Time for some season's beatings.
When it goes for the action, it uses Santa's powers as well as the Christmas setting to deliver some clever and often gnarly kills. Likewise, there's some nice setup and payoff, so you get these epic Santa Claus moments. And when it's not delivering action, it's still really, really funny.
What if he really is the real?
No such thing as Santa.
So this has definitely become a new Christmas staple of the Chandler household. Number 7, Black Phone. I love these simple survival horror films. This movie doesn't have a ton of characters or plot points, but everything matters. Everything is a piece of the puzzle. So as you're watching the movie, you're trying to piece together exactly what's going on and how these different elements will pull together in the end. And that's what this movie does so well, that as you move into the final sections of the film, everything that was introduced, every character arc, everything matters in the survival of this boy and what's going to take place in the end. Other thing I really appreciated about this film was the portrayal of the father. He's introduced as just this utter monster, but as you go throughout the film, you start to understand why he is the way that he is and gives him a little bit of a redemptive arc. Doesn't excuse his bad behavior, but it allows him to learn and grow. He's a deeply flawed person, but he's not driven by evil. I just loved the way that that was handled.
I liked it.
So this might not be the biggest or the most ambitious film on this list, but it was very effective at what it was going for. Speaking of the most ambitious films on this list, Avatar: The Way of Water. After 13 years, we finally have a sequel to the highest grossing film of all time, as well as a new James Cameron film. Now, James Cameron is one of my absolute favorite directors because he knows how to deliver immersive cinematic experiences worth seeing on the biggest possible screen. There is nothing like experiencing an Avatar film with a massive screen in 3D. And I'm not even a fan of 3D. Cameron just knows how to deliver.
You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
The film seamlessly blends live action and CGI, and that's what makes it so immersive, is that you can't see the line between reality and computer-generated imagery. Of all the movies on this list, this is the one that demands that you see it on the big screen. And since this list is of movies that get me excited about movies, the movie that makes you want to go to the movies the most is the movie that needs to be in my top 10 movies of 2022. I probably said movies way too many times in that sentence. The next 4 movies on this list are essentially tied for number 2. They're all very different films from one another that I love for different reasons, but there wasn't one of them that I felt like was the definitive lock for the number 2 spot on this list, so they're all kind of tied. Make of that as you will. Coming in at number 2 is Everything Everywhere All at Once. At a time where a bunch of big franchises are using the multiverse to either nostalgia bait or to deliver some great member berries, possibly the best multiverse film that we've gotten thus far is a standalone original film, and it is a wild and trippy ride. It's one part martial arts film, one part absurdist comedy, one part art film, and one part character study. And when you put it all together, it's as poignant as it is entertaining. Instead of using the multiverse the way that every other movie uses the multiverse, it instead uses it as a mechanism to allow our lead character to reflect on her life and to visualize the thoughts that go through the heads of most adults as they age. I also love that it stars Michelle Yeoh and Ki-Hoo Kwan. If you don't know, my movie punditry career started in the late 90s with a Jackie Chan fan page, so I've been following her career ever since Super Cop was released in the United States back in 1996, so it's just cool to see her still starring in movies like this. Then Ke Huy Quan was in Temple of Doom and The Goonies back in '80s, but he's been retired from acting for decades and decided to return to acting after seeing Crazy Rich Asians. And so it's just so cool to see him come back in this film and get nominated for a Golden Globe. He's already been cast in Loki season 2. It's just a really cool story. Anyway, this movie is a fantastic example of how a movie can be artsy and existential while still being accessible and entertaining. Also at number 2, The Batman. This for me was easily the best comic book movie of the year, but it's also the Batman film that I've been waiting for 20 years. Of course, over the past couple decades, we've gotten some great Batman movies, but they've never really emphasized the fact that he's a detective. This movie feels like it's as much influenced by David Fincher's Seven as it is by the Batman comics. Likewise, it's a movie that really puts Batman front and center. And what I mean by that is he's in the bat suit doing Batman-y things for a tremendous amount of the runtime. It really is about the Batman.
No way!
Along those same lines, it delivered a great Gotham, this slimy, dirty place where it feels like everything has a history, and it's a populated Gotham where wherever you go, there's these lively characters.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart.
And I never would have picked Edward Cullen to play Batman, but it worked.
I'm vengeance.
I did have some issues with the film, so I couldn't put it at number 1 or lock it in at number 2, but it absolutely delivered what I felt like the other Batman movies were missing. Before I give you 2 more of my number 2 picks and my number 1 pick, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. What were your picks for the best movies of 2022? Also, I've done a bunch of these other end of the year lists. You can check them out right up here in this playlist. My top 10 worst of the year, best TV shows of the year, and the comic book movies of the year ranked. Also, be sure to come back this Sunday, the 1st of 2023. I'm going to do a live stream ranking every 2022 movie that I saw from the worst to the best. It's going to be a ton of fun. Hope to see you there. Number 2, The Fableman. Steven Spielberg is my favorite director of all time, and this just might be the most personal film that he's ever released. It's a semi-autobiographical film that functions both as a coming-of-age family drama as well as a movie about the power of film and storytelling. The movie touches on a lot of emotions, but without ever overplaying its hand. The characters are treated as nuanced and complex. Both of the parents are highly flawed. At times they can be incredibly selfish, but it's always very clear that they deeply care about their family, even when they're making choices that might hurt the people they love the most.
You stop making movies, it'll break your mother's heart.
And of course, it's a movie about film, and here one of the greatest cinematic storytellers of all time tells us the story about how he learned to tell stories through cinema. It lets us know what made him fall in love with this format and how he learned the power of images and perspective. And it does it all without being pretentious. It's all done with these little episodes in this boy's life where he learns little different things and uses film as a mechanism for kind of coping with the drama taking place in his life. And also it's a movie that's really funny. It's consistently entertaining from beginning to end. So as a massive Steven Spielberg fan, I loved getting this little glimpse into what shaped him as a filmmaker and as a person. But my top runner-up is RRR. Now, full disclosure, there's probably a little bit of recency bias as well as novelty bias kind of going on here. I watched this movie for the first time less than a week ago, so it's still the fresh new thing that I'm excited about. Likewise, there's probably some novelty bias going on here. Indian cinema is so wildly different from Hollywood cinema that it's this exciting new thing that I'm discovering. What I loved about this movie is how sincere it is. Everything is bold and it lacks subtlety entirely. Everything is presented in this pure, undiluted fashion. It does all this over-the-top stuff without any cynicism, irony, without winking at the audience. It's just trying to entertain, and it goes for it. It also just has this full range of emotion, and all of it is done with that same boldness, whether we're talking about the sadness, betrayal, romance, or an epic dance-off. Because everything is played so directly, there's great moments of setup and payoff. There's clear conflicts, so when they overcome the conflict, it's so satisfying. But what really elevated this film to this whole other level was the treatment of friendship. And this type of friendship just feels utterly foreign to Hollywood films. I saw some takes on Twitter suggesting the two leads of this movie were actually gay, and it was kind of enlightening that in the West, friendships this close are so foreign that people assume romance must be involved for people to be this close together. Anyway, this movie was an absolute joy. This movie made me love movies in a new way. But of course, coming in at number 1 is Top Gun Maverick. This movie is everything that I love about movies.
10 out of 10, masterpiece.
It's pure escapism, and it's a movie that feels like the filmmakers went to any length to try and deliver a movie which would satisfy the audience.
He's the best. I love it.
If you watched my worst of the year video yesterday, one of the major themes was that I just feel burnt out on factory filmmaking, where these big studios put out these low effort sequels or remakes where they take for granted that people will watch the movie simply because of brand recognition.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next product.
Now, of course, Top Gun Maverick is a sequel to a big hit film. This is a franchise movie, but this is how you do it right. They didn't take for granted that people would show up simply because it's a Top Gun movie and it stars
Tom Cruise.
Every behind the scenes feature talks about how they spent years trying to figure out the camera tech to be able to capture the most exciting images of actual jets.
Working with the Navy 15 months to figure out how to get the cameras in these things.
They didn't cut corners. They didn't do it the easy way. They spent years figuring out how to do it the right way. And because of it, they delivered some of the most thrilling action sequences in years. But beyond all the exciting aerial sequences, it's surprisingly emotional, heartfelt, and reflective. Doesn't try to deconstruct Maverick, but it does treat him as an older, more mature version of the character who's realizing he can't be Maverick forever. It's a good old-fashioned feel-good blockbuster that's not embarrassed to be a crowd pleaser. But most importantly, I went to the same high school as Hangman, so gotta support the hometown hero. Anyway, this is a fantastic blockbuster that gets everything right.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
And is even better than the original Top Gun, so it comes in at number 1. Remember, there's some companion videos to this over on my Patreon page with 10 more of my favorite films of the year as more of my picks for the worst movies of the year. Likewise, you can check out my other end of the year list right over there, and be sure to come back on Sunday for my live stream ranking every 2022 movie that I saw from the worst to the best. Thank you guys so much for watching, and keep talking movies to us.